I'm Chandra Proffitt, and this is Baby Proffitt. Welcome to another episode of Proffitt's Resurrection Land Cruisers TV. This episode is going to talk about a Cummins conversion, as well as this beautiful FJ40 behind me. But since this FJ40 isn't quite ready yet, let's talk about the Cummins conversion first.
So a couple of episodes back, we did a feature on a Cummins 80 that we built with the R2.8. And that was only the second R2.8 we'd installed. So now we've got a lot more of them under our belt, and right behind me is a BJ60 with an R2.8 and a 5-speed transmission. So it's time to sort of update what we've told you about this engine and tell you how happy we are about it. So again, this engine is a 2.8 liter Cummins turbo diesel crate engine designed by Cummins for retrofit into any number of different vehicles pre-1999. And this engine makes about 160 plus horsepower and over 260 pounds of torque. And I know it's a small engine, but it packs a big punch, and we're going to show you a little bit later exactly what I mean by that. So we get a lot of questions about this engine. We've got the swap pretty streamlined at this point, and there's a number of resources that we use that I'm going to tell you about because there's a lot of people out there that want to do this swap themselves. So let's talk about some of the details of this conversion, and then we'll take it out and drive it. I know I mentioned this in a different video, but if you're going to install one of these engines, you almost have to get a hold of Kevin at Access Industries. Those guys have been involved with Cummins along with us since the very beginning of this engine, and they make a lot of parts for it that are going to make it a lot easier for you to install. They have adapters, but they have a lot of other solutions too. Solutions to help with the intercooler and the turbo, solutions to help with gauges and fittings, and an air conditioning compressor and bracket that works really nice. So Access Industries is key. In addition to Access Industries, we use Advanced Adapters bell housings for just about all of our engine conversions with the Cummins 2.8. The bell housing and transfer case adapters are available from Advanced Adapters, and we also get the flywheel and clutch from them.
So in the R2.8, we had to make a fuel water separator mount, which we also integrated the grid heater solenoid on. We had to make a radiator and intercooler mount. They're integrated together. Intake tube with your mass airflow sensor in it. An ECM mount and power steering reservoir. We had to use an aftermarket power steering reservoir. It all clears our charge air intake. A couple of the other things we had were a transmission cross member and transfer case linkage that had to be custom made to work with the factory floor opening. Beyond that, we had a few custom vacuum requirements for this one because of it being a original BJ60 versus an FJ60. So we have some custom manifolds down there to handle all of your vacuum needs for both the clutch and the brake system. One of the constraints of the R2.8 is the oil filter that comes pre-connected to the motor. It has specialty hydraulic fittings that aren't readily available, and so extending the hoses is kind of difficult. Our ideal location we found for the oil filter was underneath our radiator on our custom mount.
So another thing, this is a BJ60, that's why it's got the vacuum assisted clutch, and it looks a little different from an FJ60 or 62. But the brake master cylinder is in the same place on all 60 series Land Cruisers. And you might notice that the brake lines themselves are now on the driver's side of the vehicle. They wouldn't have been. On 60 series, the brake lines all cross the firewall and go down on the passenger side. But when you're doing a swap in an FJ60, the exhaust occupies that space. And so we elected, instead of just trying to move those lines out of the way and then potentially too close to the exhaust system, we ran all new brake lines on this vehicle down the driver's side of the firewall, and they cross over in the back to get to the rear axle. So I want to talk a little bit about the radiator and fans we use with the 2.8. Believe it or not, even though the engine is so small, it actually generates a lot of heat, and you have to have a robust cooling system. This is the fan that's going to cool this engine. It's brushless and it's computerized. It spins from 700 RPMs all the way up to 2800 RPMs, so it's variable and it'll go as fast as the engine needs to keep the engine cool. Up mountain passes, this BJ60, the coolant temperature has not yet exceeded 192 degrees, which is actually really good. Normally you're up over 200, even as much as 220 with a lesser cooling setup. So great setup here, all from the guys at Universal Parts. That's top secret information, but they make this setup for us and it works really, really well. Also, while I'm standing right here, I'll tell you about the AC bracket. So there's actually a mount that comes with the 2.8 from Cummins for this same AC compressor, which is down on the bottom right side of the engine. And on an FJ80, this compressor would actually fit down there because the frame rails are wide enough. But on a 40 series and a 60 series, it's hard to get the engine mounted with this AC compressor down there. Plus, it's just so far down that it's hard to make lines for and to get to. So we use this mega bracket that Axis Industries makes, and that relocates the power steering pump and the AC compressor up high, so it's easy to work on, and it'll fit in a tight frame rail like an FJ40 or an FJ60. So I get a lot of questions about diesel or gas, people trying to decide which one they're going to do in their Land Cruiser as far as a swap goes. And here is a direct comparison. This is the competition. This is the only brand new option available for a crate gasoline engine from Chevy anyway. It's an LS3 430, and it's a great setup for Land Cruisers. This, of course, is the Cummins 2.8, another crate engine specifically designed for retrofit, and the two together make an interesting pair. They probably wish there was something between them so they couldn't see each other because they're opposites, they're enemies, but both good setups. The answer to the question, diesel or gas, is really a personal preference. I find that people who want diesel usually want diesel bad enough to go ahead and spend what is going to be probably a little bit more money on the Cummins diesel swap because it offers a lot in return as far as fuel economy and efficiency. It also has quite a bit of power, and even though there's some naysayers, and I've certainly read lots of comments and even spoke to a few people who say this can't be powerful enough, I challenge that. If anytime you want to stop by the shop and drive one, if we have one, I'll take you for a spin, because this engine does perform very, very well, and we're going to find that out here in just a minute. We'll go drive that BJ60. I talked to so many people about these engines because there's not very many of them out there yet, and so people aren't sure what to expect. And I wish I could just put one of these in every city, a little storage locker, and let people drive them, because you have to experience it to believe how good they really are as far as power for just such a little engine. So this BJ60 had a diesel, a little 4-cylinder 3V, and even with a turbo, an aftermarket turbo on the 3V, it paled in comparison. I mean, the R2.8 is 10 times the engine as far as technology, and twice the engine as far as power. I mean, it's just fun, every little bit of it. So much torque. So I find myself driving too fast, right? For the conditions, because the engine's got more power, and you want to hear that turbo spooling.
You really hear the turbo.
Oh yeah.
I love it.
So we're already at 60, 5th gear now. And I could just keep going. This torque is there, and I don't want to get going too fast, but I can tell you that driving to our house, which is up over 2 mountain passes, there's a couple of 2,000-foot elevation changes, and I can keep this in 5th gear the entire time up that pass, all the time getting about 25, 26 miles to the gallon. Hard to beat. So there are some automatic transmission options for this engine. The GM 6L80 and 6L90 will work, but we've kind of stopped doing those right now, and it's because there's a better option on the brink of existing for us Land Cruiser fans, and that option is an 8-speed Chrysler, and we're working closely with a company to come out with adapters for a couple of different Land Cruiser transfer cases, and we already have a few conversions scheduled for that when it comes out. But for me, I like the 5-speed. I like having that control. This H55 Toyota 5-speed is a great option for the 2.8. It's balanced just about right. In this case, we've got 373s and 31-inch tires. 411s and 33s works really, really well too. I think if I had a 6th gear, I could go 150 miles an hour. So I hope I don't get confused talking about the wrong freeborn red Land Cruiser today, because we're going to feature this one, but it's got a mirror image right over here, almost the exact same body off restoration that we actually featured 2 episodes ago in Proffitt's Resurrection Land Cruisers TV. So I hope I'm not boring everybody by featuring another freeborn red Land Cruiser, but there's some differences, and hopefully the differences between this one and the one you saw 2 episodes ago are enough to keep your attention. This Land Cruiser is just like all of our other Stage 3 restorations, very nice, and I'm so excited for the owner of this to get it, because he's been waiting for a long time and he's chomping at the bit. And we're gonna debut this down at Cruise Moab, and hopefully he gets to take it home from there, and this will spend the whole summer cruising around Utah. But anyway, this is a 1982 FJ40, and it came to us in disrepair, rusty beyond belief. But we decided to resurrect this one rather than start with a different one because of the sentimental attachment that the owner has. So they got a new tub, 3/4 tub from Cool Cruisers of Texas, and then lots of other metal repair, door bottoms, top sides, hood repair, fenders, you name it. We try to stay all Toyota, so no aftermarket body panels anywhere. With the exception of the tub, which is a necessity, but you can't really tell on the tub, so I think that those tubs that Cool Cruisers makes are a really nice product. But this is an almost all stock 1982 restoration. There's some modifications to it that I'll go over in a little bit, so enjoy. So for starters, this customer wanted to go with 33 1250s. It's not a tire size we use very often because the width causes problems with fender clearance, especially in the rear, and we just don't like the looks of fender flares. So we enlarged the rear wheel well opening slightly so that he can go ahead and flex it up, and the 33 1250s won't rub on the body. We also moved the axle 1 inch back so that it looks a little bit better inside that wheel well opening. Some of you may have noticed the wheels on this vehicle. They look a little wider, and that's because they are. It's a stock wheel, but to accommodate the 33 1250, we've widened it to an 8-inch wheel. It's a process that's not too terribly difficult, but a little time consuming, and it's definitely a custom touch that makes these restorations stand apart. So being a body off restoration, of course the whole underside of the vehicle has been restored, and that makes it just as beautiful as the top side of the vehicle. I have to say, this rig's sitting on a 2.5-inch Old Man Emu lift with Bilstein shocks all around. To help with the height of the tires, we've got this rig sitting on a 2.5-inch light Old Man Emu lift, and then the old standby Bilstein 5100s all the way around. Of course, being a body off restoration, the underside is just as beautiful as the top. We've got the underside of the body coated with red 2-part polyurea spray liner, just like we always do, and then the frame's been powder coated. All of the undercarriage components have been restored as well. Some of the things that make these restorations so fun to look at are all the little details that we get into during the restoration. The new tie rod ends are brand new, but we send them to zinc so that they come back pretty and the finish lasts a little bit longer than what they put on them from the factory. And then all of the fasteners, all the factory bolts, clips, fasteners, springs, they're all hand prepped and refinished as well. And that adds to the contrast that makes these vehicles very, very beautiful. So the engine is the original 2F. We rebuilt this engine in-house, and we also gave it our cosmetic engine restoration. That includes a really nice paint job all of the zinc hardware refinish, and then we powder coat some of the black parts jet hot coat so that they last, and we powder coat the aluminum parts in an anodized silver. That way they have the appearance of aluminum, but they don't tarnish or die back, and they stay looking great for a long time. This Land Cruiser had power steering from the factory, and so under the engine compartment there were really no modifications whatsoever. So there are a few modifications to this Land Cruiser, even though it's mostly stock, and one of them is this bumper. We build this bumper and it's our factory replica 8274 winch bar. And then you've got the iconic worn 8274 right there. It's a beautiful winch. And then we've also got a pair of rigid truck lights. These headlights are so much better than the factory lights, or even the most up-to-date halogen lights are a worthwhile investment if you're going to do any night driving. They're a fantastic product. So inside of this FJ40 is pretty stock. We kept the stock dash and the stock seats reupholstered in this more Dura that we like so much. And the dash, there's a couple of additions that we've put in, they're modifications. The Dakota Digital gauges are just fantastic. They keep better tabs on the engine than the factory gauges. And so we went ahead with a set of those. And then this has our retro stereo, which Chandra's gonna talk about a little bit.
We are resurrecting this Land Cruiser for a customer out of Utah who is restoring it in his dad's honor. Just like this customer, I prefer to listen to my music loud. That's why one of my favorite parts of this Land Cruiser build is the audio system. To enhance our typical retro stereo system, we added a JL audio amp and two 6-inch bass tubes.
It shakes the building. You'll notice on the floor, just like almost all of our restorations, we've got the 2-part polyurea spray liner, Vortex, in freeborn red body color. Another unique feature about the inside of this is a custom Tuffy box. It's our take on one. We start with a regular Tuffy 8-inch center console and modify it a little bit. Hint, hint, Tuffy, if you're watching this, your product is fantastic, but it's dated. You've been making them the same forever. Let's see some upgrades. So this Tuffy box has been shortened by profile by a couple of inches, and then we've changed the configuration of the top pad to add a tray for a phone or some change, and also the pad is full length. And then inside, it's got a false bottom. I'm hitting the bottom of that Tuffy box, and normally it'd be a lot deeper, but that's because we've hollowed the bottom out and it's sitting over the original rear heater. It fits in there nicely, and it allows us to have locking center storage and still accommodate the rear heater. We've also changed the cup holder configuration in the front to include some coin slots and another tray for devices, as well as 2 cup holders.
My dad bought it when I was about 18 years old, and we've been wheeling together since then. And he passed away about actually 12 years ago last month. And our first cruise Moab that we did together was in 1998, so it's been about 20 years since we've done this event. So it's really cool to actually see it completed in that cruise Moab. My dad's had FJ40s ever since before I was born. He bought a 1978 off the lot, and I came home from the hospital in it when I was born, and just kind of grew up with them. And I got to be about 15 years old, and I was about a freshman somewhere in there, and I started not doing so well in school and kind of slacking off. And I think my dad was a little bit frustrated with that, but he also kind of saw a lot of him in me, and he kind of did the same thing when he was a kid. And so he was just kind of figuring out, what do I do with this kid? And so he sat me down one day and he said, hey, look, if you get your grades up and you get a B average until you're 16, I'll give you the keys to the cruiser. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a good deal. I was really emotional. I was trying to hold it back, but it was just so great to see it, back to life. Because when my dad passed away, I kind of inherited it, and I ended up parting out my 78 because I just, for a time I kind of lost, the luster of 40s and cruisers, and I ended up with this one but didn't really maintain it. And so it kind of, without my dad here, it kind of started to deteriorate almost faster. And so to see it, back to life like that it was a little bit overwhelming, to be honest, because I just think that he would really appreciate seeing it like this. And it was just overwhelmed me. I had no words. It was just great.
So this is kind of like Restoration 101, but to do a quality restoration, you have to take the whole thing apart. I've been starting to see a lot of cruisers roll in from other places or at auction, and they look pretty good from a distance, but when you get up close, it's obvious that it wasn't completely disassembled and that some of the pieces were painted while they were still bolted to some of the other pieces. And that is a good way to get a rig looking good from a distance or for a driver Land Cruiser. But if you want a quality restoration, you've got to take the thing apart. Every single part has to come apart. You should never paint anything that's bolted to something else. They need to be separated, painted individually, and bolted back together with refinished or new hardware. And that's why restorations like this one take so long but turn out so nice. Take the time to completely disassemble, refinish everything by hand, and then meticulously reassemble, and you end up with something that's truly beautiful and it'll last a long time.
Thanks again for watching this episode of Proffitt's Resurrection Land Cruisers TV. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and check us out on social media. Thanks again for watching.
What are you doing? This is not like a box of Kleenex. They don't just tear off. You just pull and it just keeps coming.
Yeah.
I was standing there this morning and somebody came up to me with a hard problem to solve, and I was like, I'm just going to stand here until my phone rings and I can leave. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to take this call.
Hey, if you ever want to embarrass him, just say one word. Prince.
Prince. You saw the bump? You saw that bump on my wife? Prince in there. Prince. All right.